looking, throwing in the end zone.
Montana, touchdown, John Taylor.
Young to the air, Young to Jerry Rice, touchdown San Francisco.
Young stumbles on the way back and fires up the middle. Pass is caught by Owens.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the 49ers Plus podcast. I'm your host, Al Moriello, and this is your source for the most objective 49ers discussion and analysis, plus timely sports and pop culture topics. Hopefully they're entertaining as well. But again, this is another podcast where we are plus section lists. Plus lists, does that make sense to everybody? And we all know the reason why. Trey Lance has been traded from the 49ers to the Dallas Cowboys. And obviously this happened on Friday. I'm recording on a Sunday. Wanted to give some time for the fervor to quiet down a little bit. I didn't want to post a new episode amongst numerous podcasts and videos and social media storms. I didn't necessarily want it to get lost in the shuffle, but if you are subscribing either to the videos or the podcast, again, a very humble thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to listen to me drone on about the 49ers, like I say, and other things. But since this, again, no plus section, there's going to be no audio breaker slides, so let's get right into it right now. And as you already know, Trey Lance was traded to the Dallas Cowboys for a fourth-round pick in the upcoming 2024 NFL Draft. Many people see this as a failure. It's a very harsh word. I'm going to use, it's a big swing and miss. Big swing and miss by Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch for what they gave up to get him. From going up to number 12 to number 3, trading 2 additional first-round picks, trading a third-round pick for a quarterback who did not pan out really in any way, shape, or form. It is a failure. Again, it's a harsh word. It's tough to come up with other words. It is a big organizational swing and miss. I went on record saying I wanted Trey Lance here. I wanted him over Brandon Allen as QB3. Certainly wasn't my decision. It wasn't yours out there. It wasn't anybody's other than Trey's, because a few hours after Trey was told by Kyle Shanahan that Trey was going to be QB3, that he lost the backup job to Sam Darnold, Trey Lance, and by extension his agent, asked for a trade. This was not Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch pushing him out the door. Now, it's an interesting thing to say because in one hand, yes, I think keeping Trey over Brandon Allen makes the quarterback room stronger. If nothing else, Trey's been in Shanahan's system for 3 off seasons. This is Brandon Allen's first off season. But hearing what Kyle Shanahan said after the fact, that it would have done a disservice to Trey in a way to stay being QB3 because you're not getting any reps. Brock's going to get all the reps. Sam Darnold's going to get the QB2 scout team reps, and QB3 is really going to get nothing. Again, all the more impressive for what Purdy did last year, since he started out the first 2 weeks as QB3, and obviously in training camp, OTAs, and the preseason. Became the backup after week 2, and then was the starter midway through week 10 against the Dolphins. Let's just not forget again how impressive, and I don't have a Purdy jersey. I don't have jerseys of anybody that's on the team now. I am in my 40s. I feel awkward wearing a jersey of someone younger than me or half my age. So I'm going to stick to Montana, Rice, Owens. I had a Merton Hanks jersey at one point. Big Merton Hanks fan in the 90s. Deion Sanders for his 1 year with the 49ers. And I'll wear I'll purchase and wear other classic players' jerseys. Like I have a Mark Brunell jersey. He's not a classic player, but I like the Jaguars. He was lefty, just like Steve Young. Number 8, just like Steve Young. I like that Jaguar team. Jimmy Smith, Keenan McCardle, Fred Taylor. But went off a little bit on a tangent here. QB room would have been stronger with Trey. Trey would not have been able to be developed as QB3, plus his salary. Not that it would have been prohibitive to do anything. Trey Lance not being on the books anymore or shedding some salary has no impact on the Nick Bosa negotiations at all. If they were saving $20 million a season by trading Lance, yeah. $10 million, yeah. They're not saving anywhere close to that, and we'll get into that in a little bit. Now, other teams that were in the, let's call it the Trey Lance sweepstakes. Other teams in the mix that have been confirmed through reports, not from Lynch or Shanahan, that were discussing Lance, the Bills, the Ravens, and the Lions. But apparently, those teams were offering a conditional 6th-round pick that can turn into a 5th with playing time incentives. And based on where Trey Lance is at, unless there were massive injuries that were hitting that quarterback roster on each team, that wasn't going to turn into a 5th. Let's go through the teams, though, these 3 teams. And all 3 teams are actually better fits than the Cowboys for a handful of reasons. So Buffalo, obviously, Josh Allen's the starter. You bring in someone like a Trey Lance, who's a Josh Allen light, big guy, strong guy, mobile. Now, this is all independent of he needs to learn the playbook, and it's going to take him time to learn the playbook. But let's say he comes up to speed quickly and becomes number 2. You could see that from a play calling standpoint, there isn't a significant change or drop off in what you need to do with the Josh Allen versus the Trey Lance. Is Lance going to do it as well as Josh Allen? Of course not. But it's not like you're revamping your offense for a completely different type of quarterback. And they have those QBs on the roster. The backups on the Bills are Kyle Allen and Matt Barkley, neither of whom are signed for the 2024 season. Josh Allen is the only Bills quarterback that's signed after this upcoming season. Trey is signed for 2024 at only $5.5 million. It would have made sense for the Bills to ante up a little bit more if they really wanted Trey Lance. Now, what this is saying to me is they didn't go after him. They didn't offer enough. They thought a 6th rounder was going to do it. I mean, are you serious? No way. But they think Kyle Allen and Matt Barkley are better options this year than Trey Lance. And given how long it's going to take Lance to develop and acclimate to a new playbook, I'm not sure they're wrong. Now, the Ravens, Lamar Jackson, again, another mobile quarterback. If Lance comes up to speed quickly, you could see how he could be a very viable number 2 in that Ravens offense. New offensive coordinator. It's not going to be a run-heavy attack with multiple tight ends. They do have Odell Beckham Jr. there now. They're hoping to get more out of the receiver position. Still have Mark Andrews at tight end. The backups, though, are Tyler Huntley, who has played relatively well in spot duty the last couple seasons. 49er cast off Josh Johnson, who's had a pretty good preseason and training camp. And Anthony Brown, I think a 2nd-year player out of Oregon. Of those 3, only Anthony Brown is signed for the 2024 season. So again, Trey Lance, counting only $5.5 million against the cap in 2024, would have been a good logical fit for the Ravens. But again, not offering more than a 6th/5th is saying Huntley, Johnson, or Anthony Brown is a better option this year than Trey Lance. And again, I can't say I disagree. I mean, maybe Anthony Brown and Trey Lance are on the same level from an experience standpoint. Josh Johnson, more experience. Of course, looked terrible in the NFC Championship game, but I think that was the moment was way too big for him. You're asking a journeyman to come in and win at Philadelphia when you're down 14-7, or I think it was he got it to 7-7 on that Christian McCaffrey touchdown run. Big moment for him. Tyler Huntley embedded as the number 2. He's not going to beat him out. Now, the Lions are interesting. And let me just go back to the Ravens thing, and I hate to say this, but and if this represents anybody that's listening to the podcast, I'll give a proactive apologies, but I don't think that's going to be the case. There are a lot of people out there, especially on Twitter. I've said this before. I'm not making this up. People of color that are all on the Trey Lance bandwagon. If you are, and you're I don't want to say you're only rooting for Trey Lance because he's a person of color, but that's like your driving force because, again, I mentioned people dropping Clan members are Purdy fans, and if you're rooting for Darnold, you're a Clan member too, and Brandon Allen, and this writer hates black quarterbacks because he's given better stats for Darnold. It's out there, guys. I'm not making it up. It's out there. And if you're listening on this podcast or anyone out there has that mentality, go root for the Ravens, man. Their entire quarterback room is black. We're not going to miss you as part of the 49er fan base because you're not rooting for the team. You're rooting for skin color. All right. Now that that's out of the way. And if Lance had gotten there, by all means, I'm sure these people would have jumped ship to the Ravens. And good riddance, right? I don't have time for racist nonsense. Now, the last team, the Lions, so their backups are Teddy Bridgewater and Nate Sudfeld, with Jared Goff as being the starter. Had a good season last season. Jared Goff is going to count against the cap $32 million next year, 2024 for the Lions. They can save $27 million by cutting him. They're not going to cut him unless he wildly flames out. And he played well enough last year. They really don't think that's going to happen. And they have a lot of offensive talent surrounding him in Detroit. Bridgewater, well-traveled. Sudfeld on the Niners last year before they cut him in favor of Brock Purdy. Of those two quarterbacks, only Bridgewater is signed for 2024, between Bridgewater and Sudfeld. And he's only counting $500,000 against the 2024 cap. So, again, another situation. Now, I think that would have been a nice situation for the future, potentially, for Lance. If Goff doesn't work out and they can move on from him and save $27 million, and this is the learning year for Lance, and then 2024, he becomes the starter, much like 2021 was the learning year for Lance. 2022, he became a starter. That makes sense. But again, the Bills, the Ravens, and the Lions, these organizations didn't value him enough to offer anything more than a sixth. If you're only going to offer that late of a pick, you're obviously not that convinced in the talent, or you're not that convinced in how quickly he can come up to speed, how he can grow, what his future is. And that's unfortunate because I do think in the right situation, Lance could have a pretty bright future. It wasn't going to be in San Francisco, and I don't think it's going to be in Dallas either, and we're going to get to that. So a 4th-round pick from the Cowboys, the best the 49ers did. And I was jokingly saying to a friend, like, well, if Darnold was traded from the Jets to the Panthers for a 2nd, a 4th, and a 6th, and Darnold beat out Trey Lance for the QB2 spot, then Lance should be traded for a 3rd, a 5th, and a 7th, right? A 2nd, 4th, and a 6th is better than a 3rd, a 5th, and a 7th. That was me being facetious. I still thought 2 picks were in play. Maybe a 3rd and a 5th, a 3rd and a 6th, a 4th and a 6th. The market has spoken. The market has spoken. He is only worth a 4th-round pick, and that's the best case scenario, and only one team offered it. Now, Lance's, you may have read this, but just I think it bears repeating before we get into the 49er side of the situation. Lance's 8 games that he appeared in are the fewest played by a top 5 pick for the franchise that drafted him in the common draft era, going back to 1967. So you're talking 56 years. This was the most futile top 5 pick in terms of game played. Lance's stats conclude with going 56 of 102, so over 50%, 797 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. So let's look at the 49ers perspective on this, and then we're going to jump into the Cowboys perspective. So San Francisco, by making this trade, saves almost $1 million this year in cap space and a little over $5 million next year. Again, not Herculean savings, but when you're equating what a QB3 should cost, Brandon Allen being one, I think he's making around or a little under $1 million this year, vet minimum. That's what you want from a financial standpoint. The 49ers now without Lance have one of, if not the cheapest quarterback room in the NFL. Between what Purdy's making, Sam Darnold, will make up to $11 million in incentives, and Brandon Allen under $1 million. And again, that's, at this point, every $100,000, every $1 million counts for, cap rollover into next year when they could extend Ayuk. Hopefully Nick Bosa gets signed in the next week, and we'll see if he's going to be ready for week 1 at all against Pittsburgh. I'll talk about that next podcast. So nominal savings and nominal cap effect for the Cowboys for them this year and next year as well. Now, what Kyle had to say about Trey Lance, I think he was pretty raw. I think all things considered, he did not want to trade him. And I don't think John Lynch wanted to trade him as well, or maybe they didn't want to trade him as much as Trey didn't want to be there. Once Trey heard QB3, remember, did not show up at practice, was a bit emotional about it, came back an hour and a half later, says he wants to be traded. Okay. Kyle made the statement that he feels like he let Trey down, which is interesting. And now listen, I tend to believe that sentiment, right? Because I think by all accounts, Trey Lance is a good kid, a hard worker, leans on his faith, goes about things the right way. I don't know so much that it's Kyle felt like he let Trey down. The situation was not conducive to Trey succeeding. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean, Trey getting hurt year 2, game 2, when the keys were handed over to him, and Brock's emergence made Trey, in a way, redundant or irrelevant, or the 49ers not willing to wait on him, or Trey not willing to wait on his next opportunity with the 49ers, although given previous history, that opportunity very well may have come this season. Past performance or past situations are not a predictor of future anything, but we've seen the 49er quarterback injury situation enough to know it's not something we're hoping for. It's not something we're counting on. It's not something that we want to speak to existence at all. It's just a thing. It's happened. It exists. It's almost tangible at this point. I've likened it before, Harry Potter fans out there, to the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher rotated every year of the 7 years that Harry Potter was at Hogwarts. It was cursed. Just like the 49ers quarterback position health-wise is pretty much cursed. Now here's a quote from Kyle, building upon that, feeling like he let Trey down and what Trey needs. Quote, "I do think Trey needs an opportunity to play more. The opportunities he's had here, when he's had those 2 opportunities, he got hurt. So preseason of his rookie year, injured his finger. Later on in the season, starting at Arizona, injured his knee. Game 2 of 2022, broke his ankle. He kind of missed that window a little bit, gave an opportunity for someone else to do it, Brock, and that person did it and stayed healthy for those 7 games and showed us something that we're confident in." He was very specific about stayed healthy for those 7 games because he got healthy game 8 and then was recovering all off season. The final portion of this quote, Trey kind of needs that again, and he didn't get that here, meaning that opportunity to play. And Kyle making it very clear, too, that the QB3 on most teams, but specifically in San Francisco, you're not going to get any snaps. I said this at the top of the podcast. QB1 gets all the snaps. QB2 runs scout team, gets some snaps. QB3 is really kind of like learning by watching. That was not going to help Trey grow. And that's unfortunate because at this point in the preseason, where is there really that QB2 opportunity? I mentioned, the Bills, the Ravens, and the Lions. In time, maybe the Bills and the Lions, there's that opportunity for QB2. But those teams were not convinced about the talent, the learning, the room for growth, the accelerated growth for that to matter to them this year. And I guess giving up a 4th round pick for someone, granted it's next year's pick, but for someone who's not going to impact your team probably in any way this season, they weren't going to do it. Now, giving up a 4th round pick so you get an injury at linebacker or in the secondary or on the O-line or running back, and you can make a trade, 4th, 5th, or 6th round pick for someone who's going to see the field, 60% of the snaps or more, sure, you do that. But I can see why they were gun shy on making a trade or a significant push to get Trey Lance. So on top of Kyle Shanahan, general manager John Lynch, in summary, he said, we took our shot. We took our shot trading up to get Lance. We knew what we were getting. He was green. He was raw. He needed to learn. He needed to play. That was the plan. The 2021 was the learning year. 2022 was the playing year. Part 1 of the plan worked out. He learned and he played, right? Played against Arizona, played against Seattle, played against Houston. More learning on the field year 1 than Patrick Mahomes did with the Chiefs when Alex Smith was the starter. Remember, Mahomes only played the last game of the season, which was a nothing game for the Chiefs since they were already in the playoffs. And that's the only reason Mahomes got in. And Mahomes threw the ball 3 times as many pass attempts at Texas Tech than Lance did. So anybody with the, the experience matters stuff, it does. But you can even have Patrick Mahomes, I think it was over 1,000 pass attempts at Texas Tech. And yes, it's air raid, throwing the ball around the yard type of an offense, but he's still throwing. And he still sat behind Alex Smith, which a lot of 49er fans don't have a great taste in their mouth of Alex Smith or believed he was given too many chances. He was with the team for 7 years? And he still sat because that was the plan. So Lance had technically 3 times as many starts as Patrick Mahomes did respectively in their rookie years. And it still didn't help translate into a more aware quarterback, or at least that's what it looked like in 2022 in this preseason. To me, I'm no QB evaluator. I'm just going based on what I see. I don't have an axe to grind. I don't have a dog in the fight. It did not look right. It did not look smooth. It did not look where a QB should be his 3rd off season. Regardless of not playing year 1, missing year 2 during injury, he was still part of the off seasons. It just didn't look right. And at some point, you've got to cut bait. And John Lynch said, this just like Kyle did, this is a win now team. This is just a missed evaluation. Missed evaluation and bad luck. Injury is the bad luck part. Brock Purdy is the good luck part about it. But, here's something I'm just going to go back to. The missed evaluation situation. If they knew going into it that Lance needed to play, but they also knew, and the they is Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, that Lance was going to sit year 1 unless something major happened to Jimmy, how was the sitting ultimately going to help his growth for 2022? This is the problem in a way of a good team. And granted, 2020 COVID year, 6-10, lots of injuries, but 2019 Super Bowl, 2020 COVID and injuries, they knew they had a team that was going to make a playoff run. But this is why garbage teams draft in the top 5, top 10 guys, because you could put a rookie quarterback in there, let him take his lumps, and it's okay. You're going nowhere, Panthers and Bryce Young. You're going nowhere, Texans and CJ Stroud. You're going nowhere, Colts and Anthony Richardson. So I get it. There's still the school of thought of sit for a little bit, let them learn speed of the game. Maybe it's not the whole season. Maybe it's the first 6 weeks. Remember, Eli Manning sat behind Kurt Warner with the Giants. Aaron Rodgers sat for 3 or 4 years, but that was by necessity because Brett Favre wasn't going anywhere. I understand it both ways. But if you acknowledge that you're a win now team, Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, and you draft someone that still needs the reps and you think that, well, he could come along quick enough in 2022 that we could still make some noise in 2022 and then hopefully really make a shot at a Super Bowl run this year, it doesn't totally click for me. I get the rationale. Now, by that same thing, like Justin Fields, even though for me it was either Trey Lance or Justin Fields, not Mac Jones, Justin Fields should not have been a pick either because he's still a project. everybody is on Justin Fields' genitals, right? Like it is like that guy probably needs multiple jock straps to play a game because everybody's got their mouths on Justin Fields' genitals. I hope he plays well. I don't care. He ran around a lot last year. He didn't look good as a quarterback. Maybe DJ Moore will help him, but I don't see this quantum leap from Justin Fields, and I hope I'm wrong. But Justin Fields would not have fit the timeline either. Sadly, maybe it should have been Mac Jones all along. If you're going to be a good team and you're going to trade up for a quarterback, and remember, they still had Jimmy, but the plan is to let that QB sit and learn and be seasoned a little bit more, then maybe you trade up for the quarterback who's the most pro-ready. Remember, Mac Jones and Lance are very similar. They really only had one full year of starting experience. But the talk going into the draft was Mac Jones was the most pro-ready. And even then I had reservations. He was playing with an all-star team at Alabama. How much is that going to really translate over? I don't know. But again, hindsight's 2020. I still don't want Mac Jones. I'm not saying it. But if you're talking about marrying up a player's skill set and readiness with a win-now window, maybe Mac Jones would have been the better choice, sadly. And on top of that, they could have just traded for Sam Darnold that offseason and not move up for Lance. If Kyle Shanahan is that infatuated with Sam Darnold, and it's not the level of Kirk Cousins bromance, right? Like, and I'm thinking bromance, the scene in Dumb and Dumber where Jim Carrey and Jeff Daniels are sitting in the heart-shaped hot tub. Like, that's the Kyle Cousins thing. I don't think it'll be that much with Darnold, but if he always liked Darnold, they could have traded for him. Now, maybe they were in on it and didn't want to give up a second, fourth, or sixth, or maybe they had initial discussions with the Jets and they thought it was too rich. Or logically, Darnold was no longer really on a rookie deal. They wanted that cap flexibility. They were close enough to the top 10. They made the trade. I understand the logic of all of it. I really do. To close out this 49ers section before we get into the Cowboys, of course, Twitter, social media, talking heads in the media, morons on ESPN and NFL Network, like the outcry and the outrage. You would think Kyle Shanahan and or John Lynch ass raped somebody, dismembered them, buried the body parts, and someone just dug them up and found them. And there was a whole lot of OJ blood or Kyle blood or Lynch blood on the scene to make a definitive, you're going to jail. You would think that's what happened with the outrage people have. They're on the hot seat. Jed York they should fire Lynch or Shanahan for what they did to Lance. Head should roll. Organizational malpractice. Really? For a missed draft pick? When 50% of draft picks are first rounders and especially quarterbacks flame out anyway? I give them credit for trying. They put their necks out there. Not their jobs. The jobs weren't on the line doing this. They got the okay from Jed York. They said, here's our plan. Jimmy 2021, Lance beyond that. You okay with it, Jed? Yes. They did it. It didn't work out. Now they got up and then they took heat for not talking the day of the trade. They don't owe you. They don't owe us anything. It's okay for Trey Lance to go home because he was emotional about being QB3, but it's not okay for for Kyle and John to not talk to the media. So what? You got the news a day later. Chill out, everybody. And when they got up there, they both said the phrase, they took accountability. But for the Twitter twats out there and people that think that they're owed a pound of flesh or someone's firstborn, that's not good enough. And there was a moron I was conversing with on Twitter, a teacher, not an English teacher, of course, because he looked like a complete rube. So I'm sure his English wasn't that good to begin with, but take accountability. I don't even know what that means. That said, you know what that means, moron? It means like, my bad. I made a mistake. We're fessing up, like, This was on us, our bad. That doesn't mean they should be tarred and feathered. That doesn't mean that Lynch or Shanahan should be drawn and quartered. It doesn't mean anything. You know how you don't take accountability? By not saying anything ever about that. I mean, granted, that was never going to be the situation because the questions were going to be asked, and the media did not let them off the hook. I listened to the press conference that Shanahan and Lynch had. They each talked for about 15 or 20 minutes each solely about Trey Lance and the trade and the why and the logic and the did you consider keeping him as a third string? And we had some moron media member, and I'm glad Shanahan got a little bit snippy because I would too, said at the end of the second preseason game, Trey Lance, had the comeback, was driving down the field, and then Shanahan had them, it was, I think, 20-19. Shanahan had him kneel around the 10-yard line so Jake Moody could kick a field goal to win the game. And the moron media member asked, do you think that was a missed opportunity for Trey Lance? And Shanahan's like, what do you mean by that? Well, because you kneeled and you kicked the field goal to win the game instead of giving Lance an opportunity to throw it in the end zone. I understand it's preseason and win-loss doesn't really mean anything, but are you serious, dude? And Shanahan said something to the effect of, oh, no, not at all. I guess I should have done that for you, huh? Like, this is what we're getting. Just because you're a credentialed media member doesn't mean you know what the hell you're talking about or that you're a smart, logical, level-headed person. And then you get on Twitter and you have all these people that think they really have a clue about what's going on, and they don't. Take accountability. They messed up. They made a mistake, just like all of us have made dozens, if not hundreds of mistakes in our lives. There's not going to be any sort of punishment. No one's going to get caned in the public square. There's not going to be a flogging. There's not going to even be just like, a slap fight that's become really popular now. I'm not going to go into that anymore than like, if you know what slap fights are, if you've seen them on ESPN or online, there's not even going to be that. Twitter heroes. They made a mistake. And these people are just waiting for Brock Purdy to lose a game, or waiting for him to play bad, or waiting for Darnold to come in and not be that great. And I'm just going to touch upon the backup quarterback situation now and probably more next podcast when the 53 is unveiled, 53-man roster. Your backup quarterback is meant for you to tread water until your starter comes back, right? What teams have backup quarterbacks equivalent to starters? What teams are equipped to go through a season with their backup quarterback playing 6 games, 8 games, 10 games, 14 games? Nobody. I'm sorry. The 22 San Francisco 49ers had QB2 from week 2 to week 10 and had QB3 from week 10 to the NFC Championship game. Yes, if Sam Darnold or any other backup out there comes in for extended period of time, it's an oh shit moment for us as fans. Like, oh shit, the season's lost. When Lance got hurt and Jimmy came in, I thought, okay, Jimmy knows the situation, the playbook, like he knows. Like, I think the Niners could be okay. When he got hurt and Purdy came in, right when Jimmy got hurt, or even after the Dolphin game, my words were season's over. Purdy looked good against the Dolphins. Did anyone think he was going to do what he was going to do? No. But that's the nature of QB2 and QB3. They're not starters for a reason, guys. But at least the 49ers had a QB last year as a backup that was a starter. They have a QB this year in Darnold that was a starter. Is he a top 30 quarterback in the league? Probably not, but he's a backup. That's what you're going to get. But these people are salivating. And Pittsburgh's a tough game in week 1. I could see Purdy losing that game. I could see the Niners losing that game, especially if Nick Bosa isn't on the team or doesn't get significant snaps. I can see it, but they are waiting to pounce. It's like sharks smelling blood in the water, and it's sad because then you're not really a Niner fan, guys. Then you're just a troll. You're just a troll. Now, let's get into the Cowboys side of this. So Jerry Jones, owner, CEO, crypt keeper, and Stephen Jones, who I guess is his son, is the general manager, made the trade for Trey Lance. And if you are not aware, they did not consult Dak Prescott or head coach Mike McCarthy about it at all. And their reasoning was, well, everything happened so quickly, we didn't have time to do it. Guys, if you said, hey, okay, John Lynch, I'm going to agree to a fourth. Let me just make a call internally, just want to get the green light from everybody else, and we'll do it. There wasn't even that. That would have been a 5-minute, 10-minute most. You get back to John Lynch and you solidify the trade. Jerry Jones doesn't care. And I guess to a lesser degree, Stephen Jones doesn't care. That's why you guys haven't been to an NFC Championship game since 1995. And that's why Mike McCarthy is just a puppet. He's just a glorified puppet for this organization. They can't handle a QB that wants to be involved. That's why they're never going to have another quarterback like Bill Parcells or Jimmy Johnson until Jerry Jones passes away, because he can't handle it. Because it's the Jerry Jones Cowboys. It's not the Dallas Cowboys. Will Grier is still QB3, or by the time you're listening to this, he's going to be cut, but he is going to be released. He had a nice preseason game last night. I watched some of it against the Raiders. And how funny was this? Jimmy Garoppolo, Raiders starting quarterback, faced Trey Lance and the Niners preseason game 1. And then preseason game 3, he faced Trey Lance and the Cowboys. Now, of course, Trey Lance didn't suit up, but that's mildly amusing, having to potentially see the QB that was brought in to supplant you is now no longer on the team, and you're seeing him as a Cowboy. That's kind of humorous. So Will Grier, unfortunately, is a victim in this. Listen to a 2-minute interview excerpt of Dak Prescott asking, again, if he was consulting. He's like, no, I was a consultant. Nothing surprises me, in the NFL. Very diplomatic response. Wasn't casting blame or anything like that. Didn't sound threatened by Trey Lance, nor should he be. But he also didn't seem too enthusiastic about it. Now, he did say, he's like, I'm going to help. I'm going to welcome Trey. I'm going to help him. He felt more bad for Will Grier. Will Grier didn't do anything wrong. There's still the possibility that Will Grier might not have made the team because they might have just carried Dak Prescott and Cooper Rush, that we're just going to get into in a few minutes, on the 53, and maybe Grier would have been on the practice squad. Now they're carrying 3 quarterbacks on their 53-man roster. And there was some discussion, and Jerry Jones, I think, was asked it, is this Lance trade leverage against Dak Prescott's next deal? Because next year in 2024, Dak Prescott's cap hit is $59.5 million. They would save $34 million if Dak was cut or traded. That's not gonna happen. But, Jerry Jones is a businessman too. Like, one, why pay anybody, $100,000, $500,000, $1 million plus more than you need to? And Dak Prescott, unless he gets to an NFC Championship game or Super Bowl, shouldn't really get that big of a raise, because at what point is your performance going to be indicative of what you are making monetarily? I know that's not how it works. It's next quarterback up, resets the market, which is just nonsense. But if Jerry Jones, as the businessman, is using the Trey Lance trade as leverage against Dak Prescott's next deal, good for him. Again, why? Dak Prescott, even though the cap hits $59.5 million, but that's not, what he's averaging per year, he shouldn't be getting between $50 and $60 million a year. He just shouldn't. Unless he has a really good 2023 and he leads the Cowboys to an NFC Championship game or Super Bowl. Here was Jerry Jones' quote about Lance. Quote, he gives us an opportunity to do what we always like to be doing. It would be ideal with Dak to have a young, prospective, developing quarterback that could just be in the room. And if you're like me, you're defining the room as not the field. So translation, there's no plan for Trey Lance. If the plan is he's just going to sit and listen this whole year, it's not much of a plan. He's QB3, and people in the media, the Cowboys are the strongest quarterback room, and Trey Lance this, Trey Lance that. Hey, what about the little white dude, Cooper Rush? I'll play my Caucasian card here. It's actually like an Oreo cookie now, right? QB1's black, QB3's black, QB2's white. For whatever that's worth. Just thought of that. Didn't have that in my notes. Just, remember to tip your waitress. There's no plan for Trey Lance. And if Mike McCarthy was consulted, there's always a possibility he would have said, no, I'm good. I like what Cooper Rush brings as a backup, and I like what I'm seeing from Will Grier. I'm making that up, but that's a possibility, right? Or he might have been totally for Trey Lance. I don't know. But all I do know is he wasn't consulted. This quarterback was just thrust upon him. Cooper Rush was re-signed in the offseason, 2 years, $5 million. I think it was only about $1.25 million guaranteed. But if you want to break it up, it's $2.5 million a season. And he's 5-1 as a starter the past 2 years. Yeah, that's better than Trey Lance's record, guys. Now, granted, he started 6 games. Lance only played in what? 3 starts. The Seahawk game, he came in after Jimmy got hurt, and he got hurt the second Seahawk game in 2022. But his record was 1-2. Cooper Rush knows more about this offense, playing with these players, being coached by Mike McCarthy than Trey Lance does. Cooper Rush is the unquestioned number 2. So if I'm Trey Lance and Trey Lance's agent, did you genuinely go to a better situation? You traded QB3 in San Francisco for QB3 in Dallas. The answer to that wasn't rhetorical. The answer to that actually is yes, but not by much. Because in San Francisco, once he asked for a trade, now you're a distraction. If you're not traded, you're a distraction because it was requested. That would have somehow gotten out. And there was a lot that was discussed about Shanahan one day said, we don't know who the backup quarterback's going to be. It's either going to be Darnold or Lance, and we may rotate that week to week. That's what he told the media. And the next day, Lance is QB3. You know how that happened? Lance was told, and Lance and or his agent leaked that. That's what forced this. And you know what? I don't blame him. Good for him. Take the reins in your professional career. Take the reins in your life. If you don't like the situation, you don't know anything to anybody. Push the envelope. Push their hand. Good for Trey Lance for doing that. Seriously, I mean that. Again, this is the only child in me speaking, but no one's going to be the biggest advocate for you than you. And I guess maybe your agent if you're a professional athlete or entertainer. I don't have an agent. So I'm all about me when I need to be. So it made sense, Trey Lance doing what he did. But he went from QB3 in San Francisco to QB3 in Dallas, and it is better, even if he didn't ask for a trade. Even if he did not ask for a trade, and he was okay with being QB3 in the back of his head, injuries in San Fran, I can get an opportunity, maybe Darnold gets hurt. Who knows? Let's just say he stays there. He's still in San Francisco, the quarterback that the Niners leveraged a lot to get. And he was the number 3 pick, traded for a 4th round pick, and he wears number 5 on his jersey. Again, I'll be here all week. Remember to tip your waitress. Numbers game, 3, 4, 5. In Dallas, he's the guy that they took a flyer on. If the Cowboy fans, and you know that they're spinning it as, oh, we got him for a 4th round pick. What's a 4th round pick? A backup linebacker, a backup offensive lineman, backup corner. I get it. And the 49ers looking at it as, wow, we got a 4th. We didn't even think we were going to get a 4th. We were only offered a 6th from multiple teams. So everybody feels like they made out well, and that's fine. Right now, there's no winner or a loser in this trade. Do I think Lance would have been in a better situation in Baltimore, Buffalo, or Detroit for his long-term future? Yes, I do. Dallas, happy with what they got. 49ers, happy with what they got. And everybody moves on. He is not nearly under the amount of scrutiny in Dallas as QB3, as Jerry Jones coming out and said, could just be in the room. Now, he's not the head coach. Maybe he does come up to speed quickly and Mike McCarthy falls in love with him and makes him the backup sometime this season. I don't see it, and I don't think many of you guys out there believe it too. If they had a joke of a backup, maybe. But again, not Cooper Rush, not a 5-1 performance, not what he put on tape, much like Brock did. So what's the takeaways here? And this isn't a summary, but just takeaway. Niners took a big swing and they missed. And it didn't work out for 2021, 2022, or beyond. But, by the way, in case anyone's forgotten, 2021 and 2022, San Francisco was in the NFC Championship game. Even with that miss, even with using a first-round pick in 2021 on a player that saw the field 3 times and had no hand in getting the Niners to an NFC Championship game. Well, he beat the Texans in Week 17, which kept their season alive, so he had a very small hand, but he wasn't a driving force. 2022, he added nothing except a loss to Chicago, and unfortunately he got hurt. And they didn't have a first-round pick in 2022 because of that, or this year in 2023. Niners get the first-round picks back, first-round pick singular, starting in 2024. This type of mistake, not having a first-round pick in 2 years and using it the first year on a player that didn't play or didn't really play at all for you, would have set back some other teams for years, right? You hear it all the time. You miss on a franchise quarterback. People use hyperbole. It sets your franchise back a decade. Calm down. Probably set your team back 2, 3, maybe 4 years. Was this even a speed bump for this team? Seriously. And I'm just going on facts. Lance drafted in 2021, doesn't play, NFC Championship game. Lance hurt, 2022, doesn't play, NFC Championship game. No first-round pick in 2022, no first-round pick in 2023. Still have a top 3 roster in the NFL. Could it be better with those first-round picks? I guess so, but given the Niners' batting average of first-round picks, they just might have drafted crap players again. They could have had another Lance situation, a Kinlaw, a Mike McGlinchey, a Solomon Thomas, a Reuben Foster. They've had more misses than hits in the first round. Maybe this is good. Maybe it was good. They didn't have to spend money on a first-round player that might not have worked out. Now, that's a very optimistic view of the situation, but that's a way to look at it. And I'm even saying it facetiously. It was a speed bump. Look at what this team has still accomplished. Only one team can win the Super Bowl every year. If you're judging this team on Super Bowls only, you're doing it the wrong way. Don't you think a Lions fan, a Jets fan, a Browns fan, a Cardinals fan, Texans, Colts would love to be in the situation the 49ers have been in the past 4 years? Of course. Sometimes you got to be lucky. Sometimes you got to stay healthy. Sometimes you need a little luck on the other end. If Jalen Hurts got hurt in the NFC Championship game and not Brock Purdy, who wins that game, guys? Sometimes luck matters. And if you're going to crucify, and I don't think it's anybody listens to this podcast because I pride myself on having the most intelligent audience out there, so kudos to you guys. But if anyone's out there is going to crucify Lynch and Shanahan for Lance, how about giving some flowers for the Trent Williams trade? How about throwing them some flowers for the Christian McCaffrey trade? How about bringing in Charvarius Ward and Javon Hargrave in free agency? How about drafting Nick Bosa, George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, Talanoa Hufanga? I named 7 players. That's 1/3 of the starters on offense or defense. 7 out of 22. Roughly a little under a third. And now let's go to second-tier players they've drafted or brought in. Eli Mitchell, Jordan Mason, Jawan Jennings, Aaron Banks, Spencer Burford, Drake Jackson, Kevin Givens, Diamador Lenore. If you want to throw blame, then you got to cast praise also for what this organization has done. It wasn't just one miss and a whole lot of garbage. It was a big miss and a whole lot of good stuff also that they've done building this roster. That's a fact. That's objective. That's why, every show has to have a thing, and I'm in advertising. So everybody, we talk about white space and positioning, and I'm positioning this podcast as the most objective 49ers discussion plus entertaining sports and pop culture topics. So I think I'm the most objective? No, because I think there's some really objective fans out there, and I think there's some really objective, legitimate media people that do reporting. And that gives some mild commentary about when they make a guess about a 53-man roster and what's going to happen in predictions. It's sound. It's logical. They take emotion out of it because it's their job. Most fans, a lot of us, we don't do that, and that's okay. But this is what I'm trying to at least do on a weekly basis, and I probably don't always succeed in the podcast, and that's okay. But the final takeaway, too, for anyone out there that's a Lance fan or doesn't, I'm not thrilled he's with the Cowboys. Listen, and that's funny, too, because the Lynch and Shanahan probably just don't view Lance as a threat at all. So here you go. Stay in the NFC and stay with the team that we've played multiple times the past 2 years and beat in the last 2 playoffs. In some way, I would think they don't view Lance as a threat at all if they have to face him. Just a guess. But this is not a Charles Haley situation from the late 80s, where they traded Haley to the Cowboys. And granted, the Cowboys were 1-15, 2-14. Terrible the year that they traded him, but that was the best offer they got. And then Charles Haley comes back to haunt the 49ers in multiple championship games and regular season games when Young couldn't get over the hump, the Cowboys hurdle, until 1994. When I see the Cowboys trade, I think as 49er fans, you don't want Lance to go to the Cowboys, the Seahawks, the Rams, or the Packers. Because those are just teams, I think, or the Chiefs, even though Patrick Mahomes, right? Those are, I think, just teams that we hate as fans. But I don't think going to the Cowboys and the Charles Haley thing probably came up for a lot of fans. I don't think that's going to have the same impact on this rivalry as the Charles Haley trade did. And lastly, again, just a parallel, guys, to the Cowboys getting Lance. Remember, 7-8 years ago, however long it was, when Tony Romo got hurt and Dak Prescott was, I think, a 3rd-round pick out of Mississippi State, played well, they did not go back to Tony Romo. Sound familiar? And that concludes the 49ers podcast. I don't want to say for this week, I'll say for today, because it's been another week of 2 podcasts. The next podcast will be dropping either Tuesday or Wednesday. I want to wait until the 53-man roster is somewhat solidified. And by somewhat solidified, I mean given injuries to Ray McLeod and Danny Gray, who's injured on the defensive side of the ball. Well, blanking on players, I didn't write this down in my notes, but there's going to be some initial cuts or people that are going to make the 53-man roster, like maybe a Gray or a McLeod, that then get put on IR, and then they bring in, let's say, a Chris Conley or maybe someone on defense that's potentially injured or not able to play the first couple weeks, in addition to the kicker situation, since Moody and Zane Gonzalez are both hurt. So I don't want to make my projections now. I don't want to have an immediate reaction show whenever the releases start happening. And they may start happening as early as today, Sunday or Monday. The Niners and all teams just have to be they just have to be at the 53-man limit by it's either 1 o'clock or 4 o'clock Eastern Standard Time on Tuesday. So either Tuesday night or probably sometime on Wednesday or Wednesday evening is when the next podcast will drop, because I think by then the 49ers will have their 53 roster spots and games of injured musical chairs sorted out, in addition to whatever additions are made to the 16-man practice squad as well. So again, as always, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule for at least this week to listen to me drone on about the Niners. We will be back with a plus section this upcoming week, probably on Wednesday. So stay happy, stay safe, and stay healthy until then, and we will talk soon. Take care.